President Trump posting on Truth Social this morning, oil prices are down, interest rates are down. The slow-moving Fed should cut rates. Food prices are down. There's no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing in billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. This is despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariffs by 34%. On top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs, plus not acknowledging my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. They've made enough for decades, taking advantage of the good old USA. Our past leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again. And a number of countries reportedly reaching out to negotiate tariffs with President Trump over the weekend. Joining us now with the latest, President Trump's senior trade and manufacturing advisor, Peter Navarro. And given the backdrop, Peter, of what we've seen, the tumult in the markets, and the S&P could theoretically be in bear market territory. And I know you make the distinction between Main Street and Wall Street, but obviously they're interconnected. So to get the real story on how many countries are calling and on whether the president is actually agreeable is important, because we've heard all these countries are making the phone call, but then we hear that maybe the president isn't interested at this point. Can you clear that up?
Sure, Joe, but let me first take you back in a time capsule, because this feels a lot like the day after the election in 2016. And I don't know if you remember that day, but I was on the set with you. The futures were dead red down. And I made the prediction that the Dow would hit 25,000. And Andrew's head exploded. It's like, wow, but you correctly pointed out that wasn't that heavy a lift. And we did hit that, not in 4 years, but in less than 2 years. And what I'm seeing, Joe, is a beautiful situation where we will hit 50,000 on the Dow, and we're going to have a broad-based recovery in the S&P 500. The market's trying to find its bottom now. The thing I would say to retail investors is don't get panicked out by all of this. And what the president could have added to that fine truth was the fact that the biggest tax cut in American history, the broadest base tax cut in American history, is coming within a matter of months. So any discussion of recession seems silly when you factor that in. Plus, the Fed is not going to do its job, but the long bond is doing it. We're lowering our oil prices, which is just amazing.
Right.
And here's the one other thing I want to say macro-wise, Joe, because look, this is all about people worried about global recession. That's what they're worried about. The restructuring that's going to happen, Joe, globally is going to start with China and Vietnam and Germany, heavily export-dependent countries. They're going to have to engage significant fiscal stimulus to reorient their economy. So that thing is going to go on. In the meantime, we're going to boom here.
I think they're much bigger than most people thought. And I think from policy institutes on both sides of the aisle, the methodology that was used has been universally derided as being non-serious. I don't know whether you know exactly who came up with the formula, but it allowed you to at least characterize most of these countries as being their tariffs well above the reality of the situation, so that when you say that we're going to do half on them, it was much higher than anyone anticipated. And I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for. There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way. And this just almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone really knows what they're doing in this case, Peter.
All right, well,
Can you at least acknowledge that?
Sure. No, I can't, because here's what I'm seeing. You throw a lot of stuff at me. First of all, the methodology was perfectly sound. It was done by the Council of Economic Advisors based on long-term studies that are in the academic literature. And the people taking pot shots at us are the same people that always take pot shots
The
at us.
American Enterprise Institute, Peter.
Of course. Joe, come on. The American Enterprise Institute has been against it.
Conservative, Larry Lindsay.
Let's not get buried down in those weeds now. You asked me a serious question. Was the president willing to negotiate? What we have here is a national emergency based on massive chronic trade deficits caused by systematically higher tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So when you ask if we're willing to negotiate, the president will always listen. But let's understand what the problem is. When you have a country like Vietnam, let's take Vietnam. When they come to us and say, we'll go to zero tariffs, that means nothing to us because it's the non-tariff cheating that matters. Let's do Vietnam, Joe. They sell us $15 for every $1 we sell them. About $5 of that 15 is China transshipping to Vietnam to evade their tariffs.
Why don't you just go after those shippers?
What does Vietnam do? They dump into our markets, killing our shrimpers, our people who make metal brackets, kitchen cabinets, agricultural products. They engage in intellectual property theft. They have the biggest number of cases aside from China at the Department of Commerce on the dumping. So the point is, anybody who wants to come to talk to us about lowering your non-tariff barriers. Vietnam has a 10% VAT. Europe has a 19% VAT. We can't compete against that. We have tried at the World Trade Organization to get, Andrew, let me just make this point. We have tried at the World Trade Organization since the 1970s to get VAT tax relief, and they've told us no every single time. We've won case after case at the World Trade Organization on things like our agricultural products, pork, beef, and other, and corn.
Peter,
and they
I think the thing we're all trying to understand is then if there are going to be negotiations and you're saying zero is not enough, what is enough?
Zero is a small first start. Okay.
Okay. So,
what is
but
enough?
then what is enough? And let me ask you, but related to that.
But let me answer that question. Let me answer. Let's take them one at a time. We got plenty of time. So what is enough? Okay, you take any given country, they're like fingerprints. They all cheat us in a different way. So here are the things they cheat us on. Some of them engage in currency manipulation. Some of them have a hefty VAT tax. All of them dump into our markets. All of them engage in heavy export subsidies and government subsidies. All of them put up these phony technical and phytosanitary barriers to our ag products and our autos and everything in between. Many of them steal our intellectual property. A lot of them run sweatshop labor, including forced child labor. They have pollution havens. So when you say to me, Ed, what do we want from them? We want fairness. We don't want them to kill American workers by inundating us with this non-tariff cheating. And it would be really refreshing to have the media talk more about that. This zero tariff thing, it's a misdirection. No, it's a misdirection. It's the non-tariff barriers.
What that suggests is that there's going to be a lot bigger challenge in terms of actually then getting to yes, if you will, or finding the off-ramp where a deal is made, given that we're not just talking about getting to zero, we're talking about getting all sorts of other policies inside each of these countries changed. Yeah. My related question, I don't know, maybe they're unrelated, related, is you have talked a lot about how tariffs, and the president's talked a lot about how tariffs can be helpful as a tax, effectively, as a way to raise revenue here in the United States.
Tariffs are tariffs, and they do raise revenues. They will. I see them as a tax cut, Andrew, because they're going to help pay for the biggest tax cut in American history. Every dollar that we extract from foreigners who are cheating us is going to go to the American public in the form of debt reduction and tax cuts, including, for example, in our auto industry. Anybody who buys an American-made car is going to get a healthy tax cut. We were given $7,500 away for EVs made partly in China. That's crazy. If Donald Trump gives away money for American-made cars made in Akron and Flint and Detroit, that's gets our manufacturing base back.
Just stick with me, though, for a second.
Sure.
Either we can collect those revenues, and by the way, there's other people who think it'll be a tax on the American people, but let's just put that aside and assume that you can collect revenues. Either you're collecting revenues, and that's the goal, or you're negotiating with these countries to get to not just zero, it sounds like anymore, but something very different than that. But those two goals seem to be at odds with each other.
Not if you look at it as a movie rather than a snapshot, Andrew. The goal here ultimately is to have people make things here. Remember, the president has said early and often.
But again, if that's the goal.
Let me finish the thought. Andrew,
Sorry.
why are you interrupting?
Okay.
Let me just finish the thought. The president has said early and often that the best way to avoid tariffs is to just come here and produce. I mean, if you look at our auto industry, right? We're an assembly line for German engines and transmissions right now. That just doesn't make any sense. In World War II, we won that war with our so-called arsenal of democracy. We can't do that anymore. We've got parts all spread all around the globe, and if COVID taught us anything, those supply chains are not resilient. They're not reliable. So I take your point, but I'll tell you, we're going to get to a place where America makes stuff again. Real wages are going to be up. Profits are going to be up. And look, it bewilders me right now in the sense that if you're just looking at this chessboard, it's the market's going to find a bottom, time to layer in. And if you look at all the good things that President Trump is going to bring you in terms of tax cuts, deregulation, lower energy prices, lower interest rates, and the world restructuring in a way which is going to be healthy. I mean, how many conversations have we had about China moving from an export-dependent parasite on the world to an economy that actually serves its own people rather than keeps
Peter,
them
you talked about tax cuts. Do you know anything about letting the top marginal rate go? Are you a proponent of letting that go from 37 back above 39.6 to try to pay for some of this other stuff? Because you know how many small to medium-sized corporations pay taxes at those rates if they're
Joe, that one's not my lane. I let Scotty
well, you just
and
said we're
Kevin
going
do
to cut
that.
taxes. That's not. You add all this together.
No tax on tips.
Together, and it's not
no
looking.
Tax on overtime. No tax on Social Security. Tax breaks for if you buy a domestic auto.
But if you raise the top rate, that's not a Republican or a conservative.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Whose idea was that? So the tariffs are all your. So you own the tariffs, then.
Joe,
I don't know if I'd want to know that.
You're going after me for something that I'm not involved in. I can talk tariffs till the cows come home. Hey, Becky, how are you?
Let's talk a little more about the tariffs, because this idea of who's getting hurt immediately. Oil prices, oil's fungible. They can go elsewhere to buy oil. Things like soybeans, corn, wheat, that could be picked up from other markets too. Brazil is very happy to step in and supply some of those things. Farmers here are already getting hurt, already asking for relief like they got under the first Trump administration. If we are raising these tariffs, taking that money and simply turning around and paying the people who are getting hurt with it, how does that benefit the economy, particularly if it leads to a downturn in the economy that costs people jobs?
Because, Becky, it brings home our domestic manufacturing. I mean, that should be patently obvious to you. That's the whole point.
That takes years. Are we asking people to be patient for years?
That's another one of the debates. How long will this take? Brian of the UAW stands up on Liberation Day, almost steals the show from the boss, and he says he's lived through this whole thing. He watched the factories go away. And now he knows that the factories are underutilized. There's brownfield investment that can be made in auto parts factories that are still there. And it won't take long.
But even brownfield will take 18 months to 2 to 3 years, I think, Peter. That's the question. That's a long time to get things back up and running.
I remember what I did working in the pandemic, and we were looking at PPE, N95 masks that were going to take 6 months to get factories done. You know, we did it in 2 months. GM got us ventilators in 14 days. So don't tell me that America doesn't have the wherewithal to move things. We can do stuff. But look, the big picture here. Let's not lose sight of the big picture. We got a $1.2 trillion trade deficit this year. We have since the trade war began, when the world declared war on us back in 1979, we've accumulated $18 trillion of money we've had to transfer into foreign hands. That's about 2/3 of an annual GDP. That is totally unsustainable. And what we need to be able to do is stop that for our national security, our economic security, and the way to do that is to get our manufacturing back, and that's what we're all about. And let's understand the problem. We charge us systematically higher tariffs, but the bigger problem is the non-tariff cheating. It's just That's
Peter,
the
let me
world
ask you
lives on
this.
that. They suck our blood on that.
Peter, let me ask you this. Elon Musk, who the president has described as a genius repeatedly, basically came out over the weekend and said that he at least implied two things. One, that he's not in favor of these tariff program the way it's structured currently, suggesting he wants it, he wants 0-0 across the board. But he also took a shot at you and took a shot at you personally. Have you spoken to him?
No, but we'll speak. I'll probably see him today in the Oval. It's no big deal. Here's the thing. It's like Elon
Well, what do you
Musk,
tell Elon? Why is he, if Elon's against this, then he's so
again,
smart?
let me finish. Let me finish here. I'm just about to tell you. Look, Elon Musk and his Doge team is making a contribution to America in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's a very good thing for this country and the American people. When it comes to tariffs and trade, we all understand in the White House, and the American people understand, that Elon's a car manufacturer. But he's not a car manufacturer. He's a car assembler in many cases. If you go to his Texas plant, a good part of the engines that he gets, which in the EV case is the batteries, come from Japan and come from China. The electronics come from Taiwan. The tires come. What we want, and the difference is in our thinking and Elon's on this, is that we want the tires made in Akron. We want the transmissions made in Indianapolis. We want the engines made in Flint and Saginaw, and we want the cars manufactured here. It's like this business model where BMW and Mercedes come in to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and have us assemble German engines and Austrian transmissions. That doesn't work for America. It's bad for our economics. It's bad for our national security. We want them to come here. And with Elon, it's fine. He's a car man. He's a car person. That's what he does. And he wants the cheap foreign parts, and we understand that. But we want him home. We want him home for our national security, economic security, and everything's good with Elon.
You expect deals near? Do you expect deals near term, or is this like a? If the market really gets in its mind that this is a 6-month or a 1-year exercise, I don't know how much stabilization. I don't know if your 50,000 prediction is going to come. I mean, do you expect deals to be announced this week with the president?
I expect the market to quickly find a bottom. I expect
without any deals from the president, or without any. Is it possible
Joe,
he says let's do a 30-day hiatus on some of this, and let's talk it over with all of our trading partners to see if we can get somewhere before we do it. Is that possible?
All right, hang on. Again, let me finish these thoughts here. I mean, first of all, it's the president's decision. Second of all, I've told you that the most important thing is for countries to come to us not offering zero tariffs, which is disingenuous because it won't get us anything, particularly with countries like Vietnam. What they have to do is tell us they're going to drop all their non-tariff cheating. And as you said, that takes a little time here, okay? We got a $1.2 trillion deficit. But in the meantime, Joe, hang on. Let's not lose sight
Peter, I just want to ask you about breaking news. We're about to end the show. We're about to end the show, and I just want to ask you about some breaking news. The EU's von der Leyen is saying that we are now ready to negotiate with the U.S. on tariffs. We are ready for a good deal, but ready to take countermeasures. We will set up import surveillance task force. Is this a negotiation that you think will bear fruit, that we could see lower tariffs as a result of?
All right, let me say the Financial Times is going to run an op-ed of mine today, online, in print tomorrow, which addresses some of that. And what I would say to the EU, when you make those announcements, would you be very careful to tell us you're going to lower your non-tariff barriers? EU, drop your 19% VAT. EU, respect the WTO's decisions to let us sell us our pork, our corn, our beef. You don't do that, EU. You dump stuff in here. You're using export subsidies. You steal from the American people every which way as possible. So don't just say we're going to lower our tariffs. That's a good small start because you know your tariffs are higher than ours. But the bigger problem, this is the thought I want to leave with everybody, the bigger, by orders of magnitude, is the non-tariff cheating. And that's got to stop. So that's what we want to hear. You start talking that language, we'll see what happens, as the boss says.
Peter, thank you very much for joining us today. Folks, that does it. for us today. Make sure you join us tomorrow. Right now, it's time for Squawk on the Street.